Hi, everybody. We will just wait for 5 to 7 minutes for everybody to come online. I think we're just 29 in number right now. So let's just wait for them. Hi, everybody. I think it's time we should start the webinar now. Welcome to this webinar today on NCA versus LLM. I'm very happy to have all of you here. I'm Rati Tandon, and I'm an advocate in the Supreme Court of India. Oh, there's somebody who can't hear me. Can you hear me? Moyo, you can hear me? Okay, great. So I'm Rati Tandon. I'm an advocate in the Supreme Court of India. I cracked my NCAs in August 2019, and we're just here to discuss about the NCA and the LLM route for establishing your practice in Canada. I think there's a lot of problem with the voice. Okay, I think majority of you can hear me. Okay, so before we start, I'd like to share with you that we have a surprise guest for today's webinar. I won't introduce him right now, perhaps at the end of this webinar. But let's bring on our first speaker for today. That's Samarth Chadha. Samarth, are you here with us?
Yes, I'm there. Hi, Rati. How are you?
Hi, Samarth. I'm great. Thanks. How are you?
Doing well.
So Samarth is a New York and Indian qualified lawyer. He's also the founder of LLM Guru. So he will be talking about the LLM process and prospects in Canada. Thank you so much, Samarth, that you could make time for us today. Over to you.
Sure. Hello, everyone. So thank you for the introduction, Rati. I'll be talking to everyone about the LLM application process and sort of just walk you through some of the typical concerns that applicants when they're starting their process of either migrating to Canada or considering just to study. What are the sort of things that go through their mind? So typically an LLM application is made up of, your personal statement, letters of recommendation, and your CV roughly. Of course, there's different components for different schools, but that's generally the application package. And your SOP has to be very, very unique. So you need to stress on why you want to come to Canada, why that particular university, why the LLM, how does all of that tie into your professional aspirations, and also how does it connect to whatever you've done, in the past. So you need to create that very compelling story or narrative in your application materials. Usually, the top programs in Canada, everybody looks at are UFT, which is University of Toronto. There's Osgood. There's also University of British Columbia, and these are sort of the top three. But then there's University of Ottawa as well, Dalhousie, and there's a whole bunch of other LLM programs that people do consider. What you will see typically will happen is that many will combine the LLM process with the PR process. So let's say you want to become a permanent resident of Canada, and you want to start with the LLM as your first step towards becoming a permanent resident. So how that helps is, if you get a Canadian degree, you get more points in the system. And once you get a Canadian degree, you have enough points to then be selected from the pool of applicants who are then invited to apply for permanent residence. So that is for one type of candidate. The LLM is sort of not just a way to becoming a licensed lawyer in Canada, but also potentially stay on for a couple of years or 3 years to become a permanent resident and then eventually a citizen. Um, in terms of the numbers, like most countries, Canada also has different fee structures depending on whether you are a permanent resident or what they say a domestic student, or whether you are an international student. So I thought it might be helpful if I take one university as an example to show you the kind of difference in terms of fee structures. So let's take UFT and the LLM at UFT. So academic tuition is like $9,000 approximately. So the total comes up, if you are a permanent resident, to be $10,000. But if you are an international student, the total can be, as of last year, it was 42,000. So you can see there's a fair bit of difference, if you do this as a permanent resident or a citizen, or if you do it as an international student. And why I stress on this difference is because if you are thinking of, the PR, and you already have a master's degree, and you don't necessarily need to get an LLM, or you need to get a master's, you can think about this fee structure and the difference, because you can do degrees when you become a permanent resident, because essentially they're cheaper for you. Really, if you're thinking about the LLM process, there are actually, in my experience, two types of candidates. One is sort of the younger lawyer that's just graduated from law school and who doesn't have a master's degree, and who needs the LLM in order to give that person that deficiency that they have in terms of the points for migration. So that is one type of candidate. Then there's the other type of candidate, which is slightly older, probably already has a master's degree, and is looking for a way to license themselves in Canada. So for that person, the question will be, okay, I already have a master's, should I do another master's because it gives me a local stamp of approval? So actually, University of Toronto, using them as an example again, they have something called as the Global Professional Master of Law, which is a program where catering to people with some years of work experience. So like, for example, if you want to get into the business law specialization of that program, you need 3 years of work ex. If you want to do, data privacy, cybersecurity, you need 2 years of work ex. And it can be done on weekends. So you can work during the week, and then you can study during weekends, and on Fridays and Saturdays. So if you're somebody who is looking at this process by having a few years of experience under your belt, you can consider this global professional master of law, because even here there's a difference in the fee structures for permanent residents and international students. So if you're thinking of this as a second LLM or a second option, that is also available to you. There's also a lot of part-time options. Osgood, which is another university, they also offer a lot of wonderful part-time options, which can actually be done. Not, you don't have to be physically in Toronto to do them. You can even do them sitting from anywhere in the world. The only catch slightly with those programs is that you have to begin your application process almost a year in advance. So like, if you want to apply for next year, 2021, you need to apply, like pretty much now. COVID may change some of those timelines. We anticipate, but as of now, the website still says, if you August 2021, then you begin the process later in the fall. So that's with respect to programs. That's that. As I said, you can combine it with the PR process. So you need to figure out, okay, uh, how do I get this LLM? How do I then use that or leverage that in terms of points in the PR system? The LLM, of course, is no guarantee of employment, because yes, it is a local stamp of approval, and it is you do get that credibility of that Canadian law school attached to your CV, but you still have to go through a process after that of articling, and eventually giving exams, which I know Rati and Mo will be talking more about later. So the LLM is not some sort of, many people, they have this question that, okay, if I do an LLM, am I eligible to practice law? Well, it's the first step in your in your journey to becoming licensed as a lawyer, but you still have a few other steps, like you have to give your NCA exams, you have to give your barristers and solicitors exams, which are also very difficult. So this is kind of step one. Then you do an articleship, that would be like step two, and step three would be your NCA exams, and then articling, and then barristers and solicitors. So now the next question usually comes up is, okay, how does this LLM help me then in this journey, and does this kind of make my life easier, or does it help me sort of reduce some of these steps? Yes and no, because it depends on how many exemptions you can get from NCA for the subjects that you already have. So like in my case, I already have an LLM, and I was prescribed 5 subjects. Now, perhaps if I do an LLM in maybe Canadian common law, or some subject that is tested in on that NCA exam, perhaps I could waive off 1 or 2 subjects from that. But you're still looking at giving some NCA exams. I did speak to somebody who had graduated from the Global Professional Master of Law, and she said that she was able to actually waive off all those NCA subjects. So it just depends, I guess, from person to person, and you have to be ready that you could have some exams, or perhaps you'll get a waiver for all of them. So one advantage that you have if you study these courses in law school before you actually have to give exams in them is that you have professors to kind of teach you. So if you have any doubts, or you need to, because if you're doing it on your own, you need that much motivation to go through a particular subject and actually sit and clear your doubts by yourself, or kind of do some further reading to sort of clear whatever ambiguities you have. But if you have somebody that's actually teaching you constitutional law or Canadian criminal law, which are typically the subjects that are tested on the NCA, so the LLM can be a great way to help clear your doubts and just make you feel more at ease when perhaps you've spent 8 9 months in a legal system that's different from yours, because you have that much more time to absorb whatever is being taught to you. So that's one thing where the LLM can be sort of helpful, and also it can help you create a local base of knowledge where if you're applying for jobs or you're applying for articling positions, you can always say that I've studied Canadian business law, or I have studied sort of Canadian criminal law, and I'm getting closer to becoming a local lawyer. So one thing I have seen, interestingly, in my experience of having advised students, is that many tend to think of Canada as sort of, like, okay, if I'm applying to a few schools in the US, a few schools in the UK, and I'll apply to like one, like the topmost school in Canada because I'd like to keep that as an option. While that's great because of, it sort of reflects the personal preferences of the applicant in question, I really do feel that Canada is not kind of that system where you can really just go and it's more of a long-term journey in Canada, where you are looking at least a 3 4 year process where you will do the LLM, get licensed as a lawyer, hopefully become a permanent resident. So of course there's a case to be made to come and study and go back, but I think Canada is very open in that sense, that if you're looking at Canada for the LLM perspective, you're really looking at a much longer stint than some of the other countries. So choose wisely, and definitely have a very solid reason, in terms of the course, or in terms of professors, or in terms of why you want to go to a particular university. Just simply writing that you want to become a permanent resident may not be the best reason on an SOP. So and there's a lot of good remote options available as well. So if you're in a position where you're working and you can't necessarily leave your job, and you still want to get this qualification, there's Osgood does a really fine job of some of these distance learning options, so you should check that out. They have actually an event. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I actually am attending the event myself, so I thought I'll just pass on that knowledge to everyone. There's an event that will be happening later this month, I think on the 27th of May, where it's like a whole full day event where people will come in and talk about the LLM process, the articling process, and how to get licensed. So if you can attend that, well and good, because you can find out about is there a way that I can be employed and finish my LLM and kind of begin my PR process that way. So that's pretty much it from my end. I just want to finish by saying, if you're thinking about the LLM, or you're unsure of what options to consider, all the people that will be speaking are very valuable resources. You can reach out to us, and also I do this in a professional capacity as well with LLM Guru. So you can definitely, I'll put my email on my contact details, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Over
Thank you
to you,
so
Rati.
much. Thank you so much, Samarth. I think it's phenomenal because people are looking to do an LLM can approach him irrespective. Are you looking for Canada or UK, US? I think he does a great job and he'll give you great professional guidance. I've had a one-on-one talk with him regarding LLM previously also. But thank you so much for your inputs.
Thank you.
So now there are a few questions, but we're going to take it later at the end of the webinar. So now let's quickly discuss about the NCA process. It'll be slightly repetitive for people who have sort of attended my first webinar, but I'll try and keep it as short, crisp, and informative as possible. So for a foreign trained lawyer who has to take the NCA route and not the LLM route, there's a three-step process. So you go through assessment, accreditation, and licensing. Now, the question is, what is NCA? What is the purpose of NCA? So NCA basically assesses your, they will just assess your legal education and your professional experience that you've obtained in your home country. And they're going to compare it to Canada, of course. So these are the competency exams that are held by NCA that you need to crack. Now, quickly going through the assessment process, there are a few documents required for you to send. For instance, the university transcripts, then there is certificate of good standing from the respective bar. So these two documents have to be sent directly from the respective bodies to the NCA without your involvement anywhere in between, because then there is doubt of the independence and the, partiality and stuff. So this assessment usually takes about 6 to 8 weeks. It can be less than that also. For instance, it was 9 or 10 days in my case. Further on, you will get an assessment report, which will give out the subjects that you have to crack in order to take the bar exams and go on with your licensing process in Canada. Now, the assessment report is going to differ from person to person, so it will not be the same for all of us. It totally depends on the legal education that you've obtained from your home country. Now, there are mandatory 5 subjects that a foreign trained lawyer has to show competency in. We're going to discuss the details a bit later on. Now, depending on your education, you may be allotted somewhere between 5, of course, mandatory subjects. So between 5 and 11 subjects, you can be allotted n number of subjects. And by that, I mean, you could be allotted 6, you could be allotted 9, 11, depends on your legal education, like I said. Now, let's go through the accreditation process. Now, these exams take place about 4 times a year. That's Jan, May, August, and October. You can divide the subjects the way you want. So let's say I have been allotted 5 subjects and I want to take admin, in the Jan sitting, then maybe Consti in the May sitting, and so on and so forth. I can do that. Or if I want, I can take 3 subjects in one go and 2 in the other. So it totally depends. You can club it the way you want. So the 5 subjects are basically Constitution, Admin, Foundation, Criminal, and Professional Responsibility, mandatory subjects. Now, the biggest question: how do you prepare for these? Where do you procure the notes from? So there are a lot of notes available in the market. A lot of tutors were giving extensive classes on each subject for that matter. But it is for you to sort of judge which tutor is suiting you, which notes are best for you. And of course, there are books also. We will again discuss that a bit later. Now, there are 5 tips that I can share with you to sort of filter and to get the right set of notes and the tutor. So the first is going to be that the notes that you're studying from should be absolutely in line with the syllabus prescribed. That's key. If you're studying with the wrong set of notes and you're expecting to crack the exams, that's tough, mind you. So you have to keep track of the syllabus, because NC keeps changing the syllabus time and again. Secondly, you can study from books also, but books usually turn out to be expensive, and because of course customs and stuff, and you will not get it in your home country. So, but notes are enough for you to crack. If you have the right set of notes, they are enough for you to crack the NCA exams. Now, there is a very prevalent question. There's a very prevalent question that, how much time should we devote in a particular for studying a particular subject? So it's very subjective. If let's say you're working, you will not have enough time to shell for 3 subjects that you're going to take in one go. So it really depends, and you have to decide for yourself how much time it takes. But on an average, it will take about a week's time per subject if you're studying the entire time. It also keep in mind that these are open book exams, so you don't have to like mug up the entire syllabus. You can carry the notes with you. Now, how do you select the right tutor? That's another question. The best is to talk to the students who have taken classes from the tutor. I think that's the best feed. They will give you the best feedback. You can also rely on Facebook. They all have Facebook pages, so you can rely on their reviews on the Facebook pages, or just connect people through WhatsApp, basically. There's also a question, do we really need a tutor? So the answer is no, the notes are enough. You can do it all by yourself. The tutor will only make it simpler and easier for you. The process becomes smoother, that's it. I would suggest that you please, whenever you're selecting a tutor, you must keep in mind the tutor's style of teaching, because they're all different. When you will go out and start searching, they're all different. And his reviews, of course, like I said, and the charges of the tutor, of course, that matters. Now, now let's talk about the exams. The exams are 3 hour long exams. They're open book exams, like I told you, and you can take the physical written material that you want. There are no electronic devices are allowed, not even Apple Watch for that matter. The location of the exams is another major thing. I mean, you can write it in your home country if NCA is conducting the exams in your home country. Not NCA does not conduct in every country, so you'll have to check with NCA if they do. I think Moyo can tell us about Nigeria. Now there are a lot of study groups on WhatsApp, Facebook, and you can just connect with them if you like group studying. The minimum marks required are 50 marks. And so, okay, marks is very important in the sense that if you, let's say 50 is the passing mark, and if let's say you get 60 marks, you'll still be given that pass only. So when in your report, you'll just see pass written, that's it. You're not going to get number. But if you fail the exam, you will get an official report, the failure report, along with the marks obtained. So in the failure report, they usually tell you what went wrong, what were you expected to write in that answer, and so on and so forth. So that's very helpful. In fact, you can ask friends who have failed. I mean, it's sort of embarrassing to ask them, and people usually do not share, but it's really helpful for first timers in NCA. Now, another key thing that has to be kept in mind is that there are 4 attempts for each exam. So let's say I take the admin exam in May and I fail it. Then the second time that I take it becomes tougher. The third time I take it becomes even more tougher. So if we have to go with that mindset that we have to crack the exam in the first go itself. Now the results take about 10 weeks, more than 10 weeks actually, from the last exam conducted by the NCA. You can check this up online once. I'm so sorry I couldn't. In my opinion, I think it takes about 10 weeks from what I can remember last. They do not, and also keep in mind that what happens, let's say I take the NCA exams in May and I do not crack it. My results are going to come somewhere around June end, or maybe starting of August. By that time, August's registration is already closed. So I skip the August period and then I have to take the exams in October. So once you're going to take the exam, you keep in mind that if you fail, you will, I mean, it will be sort of shifted by a few months. So you will not be able to take it in the next go. That's how they've sort of, laid it out, the entire scheme. We all know that the format, most of you must be knowing that the format of the answers is an IRAC form, which is issue, rule, application, and conclusion. If you are sort of, short on time, and also time management is key. I mean, before going really into the IRAC process, time management is key. I think that you have to be very good with your time. Most people who fail the exam is not because of their they have less legal knowledge, or they're not good at sort of explaining the answers. The main reason is time management. They fail to manage their time. For a 10 marker, they'll go on to write I don't know, maybe 40, 45, 50 minutes. So please keep that in mind, that you are able to devote the right amount of time to each question. Also, if you're falling short of time, just so for IRAC issue, rule, there are marks for each step. There is marks for issue, there's marks for rule, application, conclusion. If you're short of time, at least write the issue and the rule. You will at least get 4 to 5 marks. That's in case you are falling absolutely short of time. I think that's about it. I hope I've been quick and short. Um, Now it's time for our third speaker. Hi, Moyo. Can you hear us?
Yes, hi everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. So Moyo is our third speaker for the evening. Moyo is a solicitor at the City of London. She also completed her LLM from the University of Toronto. She is also a YouTube star, as Samart likes to call her. And she also runs a YouTube channel in the name of Ask Mo. So I would definitely ask all my participants to go follow her and check out her videos. They're very informative, and she's really devoting a lot of time, and we're very thankful to her. Over to you, Moyo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rati and Samart, for explaining the NCA process, and Samart for telling us about the LLM process. And thank you also for that introduction. So I like telling stories, and I feel like a lot of people can relate to stories. That's why I like telling stories, and I always like to tell people about my own story, with the hope that someone can, get a thing or two from what I'm talking about. And so I know Rati has already given an introduction about me, but I'm just going to give a brief introduction about myself and explain how I moved from Nigeria to Canada, and just explain the process so you guys can follow as well. And so my name is Moyo, but I prefer that people call me Mo. And I'm licensed to practice law in Nigeria, and I'm also licensed to practice law in the province of Ontario. And I'm Nigerian, and I moved to Canada in September 2016. And the sole purpose for my moving was to pursue my Master of Laws at the University of Toronto. And like Samart said, sometimes you just, you think of just coming to Canada to pursue your master's, but there's a bigger picture, right? Once you're done, you want to become a permanent resident, you want to go through the licensing process. So this is one, you should always have this at back of your mind. It is not just the LLM, it is, a big picture. And so once I started my master's at the University of Toronto, I started the NCA process as well. So as I was doing my master's, I registered for the NCA process. And so I was doing both simultaneously. Now people ask, is this a good thing to do? Can you handle both the LLM process? Because it is a very serious program, right? The standard for graduate students are very high, right? So I'm handling that and doing the NCA process. People ask if this is a good thing to do, but I would always say, know what works for you. If you think it is something you can handle, absolutely go for it. If not, I would suggest that you focus on the LLM program first and then do the NC. But I was doing both at the time. And unfortunately, it affected me because I failed my first NCA exam, right? Because the workload was a lot. And I failed my first NCA exam, and I, like Rati said, I have a YouTube channel, so I explained the whole process, of how I failed, what I had to do when I failed, and the things that I did that helped me pass when I wrote the exam the second time. So in case I'm not saying anybody's going to fail, but you just never know. So it is always good to have this information and know what to do in case something like that happens. So I took the Canadian criminal law. I also took the foundations, Canadian foundations law, and I took, I think, was it the administrative law for my NCA exams. And I also did something where I during my LLM program, I took some of the NCA courses as well. So I think Samad already spoke about this, where you can mix the LLM program and the NCA program as well. That is an option. And so the amount of courses I took for my NCA was reduced. I only wrote 3 mandatory subjects because I took 2 of those other subjects during my LLM. And so once I was done with my LLM, I focused on the NCA exams. I wrote the NCA exams, and then I passed. And once I was done, I went ahead to apply for an articling position, and I articled with the City of London, the City Solicitor's Office. And once I was done, I got retained. And now I act as one of the solicitors at the City of London. And people always ask me, what is the City of London? Like, what does that even mean? So London is a city in Ontario. Just, I know everybody knows Toronto. Toronto is probably the most popular city in Ontario, but London is also a smaller city with a population of about 400,000 people, and it's about 2 hours away from Toronto. So it's a city, and I basically work for the government. I work for the City of London, and City of London is solely my client. And I'm just going to add a few things to what Samat and Rati has said. And I know Samat spoke about the LLM process specifically, and he mentioned that this doesn't really guarantee you a job or an articling position, which is very true, right? I know people who have, who have done an LLM program from the University of Toronto, Osgood, and they still couldn't find a job. So getting an articling position or a job once you get called to the bar is very unique to each individual. However, doing the LLM process definitely helps a lot. And I remember when I started my articling position, I was having a conversation with my employer, the city solicitor, and I was just asking him, like, why did you guys hire me? I know it's very difficult for internationally trained lawyers to get an articling position, and I know like over 100 people applied for this position, and you guys were just looking for one person. Like, why? I was just very interested in knowing why. And he said, everybody's resume looks the same on paper, which is true. Like, if you take my resume, Samat's resume, Rati's resume, probably looks the same. We have masters, a master's degree, we have an LLB. We basically have very similar experiences, but something needs to stand out, right? That is how the employer will know that, okay, this is the right candidate for, or the right fit for the job. Your cover letter needs to stand out, your resume needs to stand out, because everybody's resume honestly looks the same. Almost everybody's resume honestly looks the same on paper. And so he said, you went to U of T, and that is, a really good school, one of the top schools, in Canada. And if you could get into U of T, we trust that they have done a good job, in filtering, the best candidates, and we believe that you are, the right candidate for the job. So that basically said that, the fact that you went to U of T opened that door, right? So doing an LLM might not, doesn't guarantee you a job, but from my experience, it definitely does help in, it gives you an advantage. Let me just put it that way. It gives you an advantage. So that is also something to think about. And people always ask me, did you fund your LLM process, or did you get a scholarship? Because I know getting a scholarship is big. Like, who doesn't want free tuition? Everybody wants free tuition, obviously. So people would always ask me, but my LLM program at the University of Toronto was not, it was self-funded, which means I didn't get a scholarship. And the truth is, getting a scholarship is, especially for an LLM program, I found from research, right, that it is not as easy as it is like in the UK or in the US. And, we have very limited law schools in Canada. So even getting into a law school in Canada is very, very highly competitive, and, let alone getting a scholarship. So this is also something people ask me, but I wrote an ebook called the NCA Starter Pack, and I did some research, and I listed out some universities in Canada that offer scholarships for the LLM program in Canada. So this is also something you might want to check out, so you can, be strategic enough if you cannot self-fund your LLM program to find the good schools. Because another thing is, in as much as we all want to do an LLM program, like Samart said, you have to be very strategic about these things, right? You don't want to do an LLM program and then it doesn't give you any advantage, right? So you want to make sure you're looking at a very, very good schools, right? Because there are some schools in Canada that rank high, and there's some schools that don't as well. And I'm almost running out of time, but yeah, another thing I have found about most ITLs is that and by the way, ITL stands for internationally trained lawyer or foreign trained lawyer. Is that most ITLs have the big picture about the licensing process. They know that they want to get into the process. They know that I need to article, I probably need to write the bar exams or not write the bar exams, depending on the province I choose to practice in, but they don't understand the details, that go into it. They just have the big picture. They don't know how should I go about it? Should I take the LLM? Should I not take the LLM? Should I combine both? Should I just come in as a PR, and because there are different routes to going about this. And in that ebook as well, I really break down all the steps as well. I explain how if you choose to come in, another option available is you can choose to come in as a visitor from your home country, right, to write the NCA exams. But people don't think about this option. I know people who have done that. All you need to do is apply for the temporary resident visa and plan to write your NCA exams when the NCA will be writing its exams rather. And come in and write your exams. Like Samad said as well, you can come in as a PR, you can combine both. There are like several options. So I don't want you thinking that there is only one route to take, right? There are several options to explore when we are talking about these things. Yes, and I know Samad also wanted me to talk about, my experience at U of T and just explaining if it was really, really worth going to. I would say yes, it was really worth going to because, like I explained already, it gives you an advantage. And my experience at the University of Toronto was, at first, it was very shocking for me because first of all, the grading system was insane, right? In Nigeria, I think if you probably not every university in Nigeria, but the university I went to in Nigeria, if you have a 70, you have an A. But the University of Toronto, for the LLM program, if you have a 69, you have an F, right? So coming into that system for me was insane. Like, how do you go from, so in Nigeria, if you have a 49, that's an F. How do you go from having a 49, as F to having a 69 as F? It was just very, it was very crazy. And it took a lot of adjustment for me as well. So you need to understand that not only is it very competitive, but once you get there, you also have to bring in what you've got. You also have to get ready to, to really, really study hard because they expect a lot from you. And just to conclude, Rati asked me to speak about the NCA process in Nigeria, whether it's being done in Nigeria. No, the NCA does not offer any centers in Nigeria. I know they do offer, I think the closest center to Nigeria will be South Africa, but you need to please confirm with the NCA and check. But on their website, they did say they offer centers in South Africa, and that is the closest country to Nigeria. So if you're here and you're Nigerian and you want to write the exams abroad, you can always opt, to write it in South Africa once you have confirmed that this is possible to do with the NCA. I think that concludes